clap. All right, friends, I'd like to call this meeting of the Academic Senate officially started. I'm going to share my screen that has board docs. There we go. We have our Zoom meeting guidelines there. We've relaxed them in practice the last couple of meetings, so hopefully that our relaxation of what's outlined there is going well for folks. The biggest one I think to remember is that we are using the raise hand function for senators to be called on. So just please remember that, and then you can unmute yourself when you are called. This time we'll move on to the land acknowledgement. And if I could have please a volunteer to read that. Anyone? Go ahead, Tara. Where'd it go?
All right. Hopefully I figured out how to unmute myself. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that Santa Barbara City College sits upon, their home. We are honored to be guests upon this land and are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support and look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Tara. We will now move on to the approval of our agenda. There are 2 timed items. We have 2 presentations that will be put in front of us today. One of them is happening at 4:05, a presentation by Jana Garnett from DSPS. And then at 4:15, we're going to have a budget presentation by James Savas. So with that, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
That was Ellen.
Second, Michelle.
Second, Michelle. I think we can do it by anyone who is in favor of this, please just unmute yourself and say yes.
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 If anyone would like to vote no, please unmute yourself. Vote no. Okay. I'm hearing no nays. Abstentions. I just learned recently that you don't have to call for abstentions, but that is our practice. So any abstentions? Okay, so our agenda is approved for today. I received no request for public comment prior to today's meeting. Christina, did you receive any requests via email?
Did not.
Okay. So at this time, I will call for any guests or people present in the meeting to raise your hand if you'd like to provide public comment at this time or at a later time at an agenda item. I'm not seeing any hand raise. Okay, so there's no public comment. All right, approval of our, oh, excuse me. Before I move on there, item 4.1, Senate membership changes. If you recall, Christopher Bates, after being elected in the spring, had to step down from being the elected senator for the Fine Arts Division. After an election and a conversation with the division, Patricia Stark will be serving as the Fine Arts Senator, as well as her position of past president of the Academic Senate. So she will be voting in that way. So the membership list has been updated, so please note that change. Item 5.1, minutes of our regular meeting from September 9th are listed here. It's my understanding that one suggestion was provided to Christina. Christina, could you just let everybody know what that change was prior to?
Was the it was by Cornelia. It was the Faculty Association report, and it was just a quick wording of the sentence of the deadline for submitting. I'm blanking on it, but it's pretty clear on the minutes.
Okay. I think it was submitting for the election of FA that already happened, right? It was a clarification of the date and time.
Yes.
Okay. So that suggestion has already been noted to the Academic Senate and will be updated in the minutes. And if there's not further suggestion of changes to the minute, we can go ahead and approve these. So does anybody have any changes they need?
Yeah, I wanted to just ask on 6.4, it says this item is an effort to offer transparency to the campus community. That's the request to agendize items point. But the following point is specifically about the suggestion to agendize a conflict of interest, the possibility of creating a conflict of interest policy. And that's not clear in the minutes. If we could just clarify that, that Patricia's request was that we ask AP to check if there are similar processes in the college regarding conflict of interest. And I believe also that the recommendation was to bring it back to forward it to AP. But those two items aren't separate or clear in the minutes. Did I articulate that well enough to be understood?
Think so. Christina?
As the person who made the motion, let me just clarify that because this item was on the agenda in our new process, which is let's talk about whether we want to put things on the agenda. What
Right.
my motion is that we do bring it back to a subsequent agenda with the idea that we would ask AP to look into it. Robin, I think it's actually okay. But we can certainly clarify that.
Maybe the confusion is that it comes right after this item is an effort, but that's not referring to the conflict of interest. It's
Correct.
referring to the request to agendize items.
So Robin, what we could do is ask Chris to add in specifically for this item, specifically on the item about, and then summarize what Art was putting in his. Okay, we could say specifically about an item to create an AP on conflict of interest.
Yeah, just maybe
How does
make
that
it
work?
clear. Just maybe make it clear that the paragraph about your comment is specifically related to a suggestion
Okay,
to agendize that item.
okay.
So do we have that clear now, Christina?
Yes. And I'm working on the doc right now.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think there was one more thing, I'm sorry, because I don't want to hold us up. In the item about sabbatical leave, 9.2, after the motion, it says motion is now an action item, proposal to combine the two committees, motion to consolidate the two committees as discussed. Discussion, Senator Goodnow would like to clarify that each committee can work with their clerical support. There aren't two committees anymore, so I'm not clear on what that comment is related to, because there won't be two committees anymore.
We could add in the newly constituted committee.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Great.
Chris, you got that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Excellent. Are there any other suggestions from senators for changes to the minutes? If not, we can go ahead and adopt them as amended unless there are any more objections or changes. Okay, so with that, we have accepted the amended minutes. They will be added to our documents from last meeting. All right, President's report. I'm not going to give an oral report today. Everything that is in my report is detailed there with links out to other constituency group documents and things like that. So as you're going through it, perhaps I'll point out that the enrollment information was linked in my SEM report. And the other thing of interest, I highlighted it and bolded it, is that faculty should definitely be paying attention to just about every single budget presentation that is made, whether it's here at Senate today or at the Board of Trustees. There's also going to be, what are they called? Town halls or a webinar on the budget as well. And so for moving forward, people should be paying close attention to the budget discussions at different governance groups over the next few weeks for sure. So with that, I will yield the rest of my time. Senate liaisons, they also provided written reports. If anybody would like to offer an oral report, please let me know by raising your hand. Ruth's raised her hand. Go ahead, Ruth.
Briefly, make sure, first of all, that you read them. Dr. Goswami gave a brief update saying that we're preparing for the spring semester and that it's expected that about 10% of our courses would be offered face-to-face. Those being, of course, those courses that would make sense to be offered face-to-face, like lab courses, PE, that sort of thing. And of course, anything and everything is subject to change. Second, accreditation. The draft of the ICER was provided and they are asking for input. And so if you can get that out to your divisions, let them know that they are asking, accreditation folks are asking for input. I put links to the survey and then I also put links to the actual draft itself. And they emphasize that the way to approach it, since it is a very long document, is to look at the table of contents and then target what you want to provide feedback that way. And then of course you're welcome to read the 200 and I believe 6 or so pages if you'd like. So that's one thing. And then the rest, make sure you read up on that. I will say, in addition to those two things, that what was brought forward initially as a public comment about the Campus Climate Advisory Council was presented at CPC, who seemed to be receptive. Although it was mentioned that we need to make sure that it just doesn't become, another committee where, we just give it things to do and it really gets nothing done. But we'll stay on top of that, I promise. Other than that, read these reports. That's it.
Thank you, Ruth. Yes. Cornelia.
Just a quick addition to the report I provided in writing. The FA has scheduled a live Zoom chat for all faculty for this Friday at 9 a.m.
Thank you. Patricia Matone, I'm a little confused. Your hand is up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I did had a question for Ruth, maybe. Is that the presentation last Friday about accreditation, that was supposed to be recorded and shared? Does anyone know where that link might be found? I was not able to go and I wanted to see it.
That might be a question for Patricia.
Actually, I think I'd let Pamela handle that one since Bea handled the whole thing.
All right. I will answer that when it's my turn to do a teeny little snippet report.
Excellent, thank you. Robin.
Yeah, just 2 quick things. One, because we voted on the merger of the sabbatical leave and faculty recognition committees last week, I just wanted to say, yes, there's plenty of detail in the report, so I'll echo Ruth that everybody should read them, but the sabbatical leave committee got right on it this week, and Sheila Wiley has visited and offered to also provide support and guidance in absorbing those duties. So I think that's going to go very smoothly. The committee was right on everything immediately, and I believe has already requested dates at Senate for upcoming award nomination deadlines. And the other one, just so everybody's aware, to take it back to their constituents, the Faculty Resource Committee has put out a survey on faculty tech needs to provide online instruction. There's some funding available, and I believe they sent out a Google Doc. So if everybody can just take note of that if they have tech needs. That's it.
Excellent, thank you. With that, that concludes our liaison report, Senate liaison report. Pamela?
I did just want to reiterate what Ruth was saying about the importance of taking a look through our incredibly important institutional self-evaluation report. We did do a presentation on middle of the day on Friday online, and those of you who were able to be there, thank you very much for showing up. We can share with you in advance the presentation slides, which are really easy to get a hold of. We did record it, but we're having it captioned. So as soon as that's done, we'll be posting that. I think we'll probably be posting that on the EVP website, but we'll send out a note to let everybody know where that link is going to be. It'll be posted in YouTube. And so I'll follow up on that. We have a survey that's out right now that's really easy to use, but we will take feedback in any way that you possibly want to share it. So if it's easier to share it with your senator, if it's easier to share it with Patricia, if it's easier to share it with Ray, if you want to send me a note, all input is welcome. Not necessarily everything will get taken care of in this first round of revisions, but everything will be kind of accommodated and worked through as we navigate. And as you're reading through an area you're really expert about and you think, hey, I have more examples, I have more evidence, always feel free to send those in. So in the new world of ACCJC's new approach, they're trying to have shorter institutional self-evaluation reports. So they've asked us not to make something that's 500 pages long. So you'll notice that we've been judicious in our evidence selection, but you may think of something that's fresher, better, shinier, brighter. So please feel free to forward that along. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Patricia, I see your hand is up.
Oh, yes.
Ray?
I feel like I'm always the person to say hurry up, but we are we are on a pretty tight timeline on this. So I'm co-chair of the Standard 4A group, and we're actually setting up a meeting now for the middle of next week to start taking a look at the feedback. So Z has put some deadlines on the survey, but the type of oral feedback that Pamela just referenced, we really need to have that by Wednesday of next week so that we can incorporate it in all of our assessment, et cetera. So, yep, hurry up and do it with everything else you got to do.
Hey, Ray, it's Michelle Gottwald.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Attempted to raise my hand, but my hotspot that I got from the college keeps on bumping me off, so I don't think that it worked. It's not allowing me to raise my hand. I just wanted to give a brief update on the liaison reports that I think a couple things very, very quickly. In the District Technologies Committee, one of the things that faculty were assuming was that all of the Chromebooks that had been distributed that were taken out of classrooms and shared with students.
We lost you.
Michelle, can you hear us?
It looks like she dropped off.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm here, but I keep on getting booted off with my hotspot.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, if you are expecting to utilize those Chromebooks in the classroom in the future, and that's not going to be a possibility, so it's important that you request Chromebooks for the classroom via program review. So many of the faculty were under the assumption that those Chromebooks would be available.
Michelle, if you can hear us, we lost you again. One thing that we can do is we can we come back to this? If can we do this out of order?
I apologize. It's the my hotspot that is not working, so I really understand the students' frustration when they are unable to connect. So I guess we can come back to it. I just would it be possible for me to send you an email that you can read?
Yes. Yes. Let's do that.
Okay, I'll
Cool.
do that.
Okay. All right. Before we move on to our next agenda item, consent items, I'd like to call on Patricia Stark momentarily.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Ray. Folks, just indulge me for a second. One of the caps that I'm wearing this semester is I'm sharing advisement responsibilities for the student newspaper. And it's journalistic convention that whenever we have a reporter in the room, typically we identify that. And our reporter, Rodrigo Hernandez, is quite disadvantaged in that respect. So I just wanted to alert everyone that we do have a journalist in the room, and that in addition to everything being public record, you also have a journalist in the room. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Rodrigo.
Yes, thank you for being here. Rodrigo, representing the channels. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. There's only one item on this part of our agenda, which is appointing our fall plenary delegate, which will be Kathy O'Connor. Just a bit of context for those that aren't familiar with what the ASCCC is or what the fall plenary is. The ASCCC is the State Academic Senate, for which we are members of. So the State Academic Senate fulfills a variety of roles for us. And each fall and spring, they host what's called a plenary session. So the fall plenary is coming up in November. Typically, we have limited resources to send senators and participants from the Senate. So this year we are sending myself as just a participant, Ruth Morales as somebody who hasn't gone before to kind of learn the ropes, and Kathy O'Connor will also be a participant, but she will be serving in the role of delegate for us. So there are a number of resolutions and policy changes and procedure changes that happen at the state level. And so for Santa Barbara City College to be able to participate in the process of changing those and voting upon those, we have to have a designated delegate. Kathy O'Connor has been serving in this role for a number of years, and so we are very excited to have her back and fulfill our need in this way. And Ruth is going as well to kind of learn the ropes and see what the delegate responsibilities are all about. So that's why this is here. There's no other items on the consent agenda. So with that, if somebody has a clarifying question or would like to make a motion for approval of our consent agenda, we can do that now. Robbie.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second? Robin?
I'll second.
Thank you. And I think with an item like this, we can unmute ourselves. And if we are in favor, please say yes at this time.
Yes.
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 And if you are going to vote no, please unmute yourself and vote no at this time. And if there are any abstentions. Pamela, your hand is raised.
Yes, as a non-voting person, this doesn't have to do with the voting. I just wanted to put into the record our gratitude to the foundation for financing the participation, and how grateful I am that they were able to help us step up during this budget crisis. It was really fabulous.
Yes, thank you very much to the foundation. Okay. So now let's move on. Oh, Robin, I still see your hand up. Is that up from when you seconded?
No, it's up because I'm lame. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So item 8.1, very quickly. Each year we approve a new academic calendar. And so last time there was go around, there was some faculty that wanted to get involved and be part of the conversation of planning for the new academic calendar. I brought this to Dean's Council recently. The deans agreed that we're going to have a task force, an ad hoc group, a subcommittee, whatever you want to call it, to take a look at the calendar and have some conversations about it. So the Academic Senate is looking to appoint 5 faculty members to this committee to take a look at the calendar. Ideally, we would get a variety of different faculty members from areas with labs, co-requisite, high course units, and so on. So I don't need the names at this time. Please just shoot me an email. My email is posted on the agenda. I will also send this out faculty-wide. So that is our first item. I feel like we have a clarifying question. Michelle? Michelle got one?
Nope, I responded before you told me not to, and I am sending you an email to request to be on the committee.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Thanks, Michelle. Pamela?
I just wanted to strongly encourage our faculty in the ed support services area to be participants in this, particularly counselors. So we've heard a lot of different concerns and celebrations about our 2 summer term piece, and we all have strong feelings about it. We're not opening that right now. But we know that counselors have had a lot of insight into that area, so we just want to make sure that the invitation goes broadly out to folks in that area as well. Library may well also have some insights into this, so that division needs to be clearly represented if possible on the encouraging side.
Anna?
Just wanted to clarify, the representatives have to come from Senate, or it's any faculty?
They have to come through Senate. So the district has said to Senate formally, we are looking to have representation from your folks. And then Senate is in charge of figuring out how to do that.
Right, but they don't have to be Senate reps. It's any
No, you're right. Anna,
They
no.
don't have to be senators.
Right. They
That's
can,
all I'm asking.
right. Okay, sorry. I misunderstood your question, Anna. Yeah, no, they don't have to be senators. They can be any faculty, but the Senate is the one that makes the appointment.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 8.2, the call for your department's participation in the Race Equity Impact Assessment for credit faculty. This email has gone out from me a couple of times now. The last day to announce or request your participation will be this Friday. So you'll get at least one more reminder email from me. And please make sure that the majority of your department is willing to participate, and you as a faculty member as either part-time or full-time credit can lead the charge on this. So this is a great way to get our part-time faculty involved, and hopefully this is a process that gets rolled into our program review in years that are coming. And so this is a great time to learn about this work and make a real impact for classes. So with that, I won't say anything more. The last one, there are still a number of faculty committees, or excuse me, not faculty committees, committees, whether they are Senate committees or college-wide committees that need members. Specifically, I have been requested to find one more faculty member to serve on the Facilities and Safety Committee. They meet the 3rd Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. In my mind, a representative from the fine arts in the humanities building specifically would be really great and well served on this committee, but we can take on any faculty member for this. And then also we are still looking for the CTE liaison to the State Academic Senate. There's other committees that need faculty representation. So if you look at our working document that I shared out with you all over the summer during our retreat meetings, you can find vacancies there. So if you know of someone within your division that is looking for a committee and campus service in that way, please check there. All right, great. Where are we at with time? 3:30 exactly. All right, so item 9.1. I'm actually going to recuse myself from the discussion of this item because there's a conflict of interest for myself here. And so I'm going to kick it over to Patricia Stark, who initiated this work when she was Academic Senate President, to lead this discussion.
Okay, so as background, folks, for the last 5 years, the Academic Senate President has been compensated at 12 teacher loaded units, 12 TLUs. So that's a fact. Now, when we started looking at a variety of changes to our bylaws back in the spring, one of the things we spent quite a bit of time with is taking a look at all of our committees to see whether or not they were working efficiently, whether there was redundancies, et cetera, et cetera. And as you know, we've combined two committees, a total of 4 committees into 2 committees. And our latest action, which was at our last meeting, and as Robin already talked about this meeting, is that we combined the sabbatical leave committee with the committee on faculty recognition. And when we did that, we actually freed up 1 TLU that's kind of out there. But we also, in our discussions, and it was publicly stated in our meetings in the spring, that if we followed through on this action, that TLU would be allocated into the total compensation for the Senate president. So as we 2 weeks ago agreed to combine that committee, freeing up 1 TLU, so in keeping with our intent from the spring, I'm now saying that we need to have a bylaw revision in order to do this. So right now it's on as a discussion item. If we have a majority vote, we can move this to action. Actually, let me check my thing here. We would need a simple majority vote to move this to action. Failing that, then we will have this on our next agenda for approval. But we are asking that it be retroactive to this semester and that bring the new compensation model up to 15 TOUs, which is a full course load. Any questions about that?
Looks like Michelle has her hand up.
We discussed this previously, and we were all in agreement that this would be something that we would want to do. At this point, can I motion that we vote on this? Because my recollection is that everybody was in favor of it.
Michelle, if we chose to do that, and guys, I'm just interjecting here. As a point of order, we need to have 2 separate votes. The first vote, which would require a simple majority, you would make the motion, someone would need to second it, and that motion would be to move this discussion item to action. If we get a majority of vote on that, then we would need to have a second motion and a second vote to actually approve the item as presented on the agenda today. So would you like to go ahead with that motion, in which case you would need to have a second to move this to action?
I would like to go ahead with that motion. Please.
I second it.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take over, guys, since you recused yourself for a potential conflict. So it was moved by Michelle and seconded by Pam. Any discussion? Okay.
Can you just repeat? I'm sorry. Did you say, my internet cut out? Did you say 14 TLUs or 15 TLUs?
Her total compensation now would be 15 TLUs.
Thank you. I couldn't hear. Sorry.
Okay. So hearing no discussion, I will now ask for a vote. Ray, are we doing this verbally? You can sound off on that.
Yeah, so for the simpler votes, I was just doing the roll call by like announcement, right? But we should definitely do a roll call vote for this.
Okay.
Going through the membership and calling for each one. So I just put the membership up on the screen.
Okay, as a reminder, folks, this is a vote on moving this to action. So, Ray, you want me to call the roll call? Okay, I will call.
I want to stay out of it.
Okay. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and do the roll call. Chris, are you ready with the votes? I don't usually do this, so.
Of course I am.
Okay, thank you. I am first, and I vote yay. Oh, sorry. And then we have, I think it's, I'm going to go down and call names. Cornelia?
Yes.
Jen Hamilton?
Yes.
Devana?
Yes.
Jenny Baxton?
Yes.
Michelle Gottwald? We can't hear her, but
Yes.
I think since she made the motion, maybe we can assume. Pam?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Tara?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
I'm looking for senators here, folks. Hold on just a second. Russell?
Yes.
And Robin?
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Tara Carter. Okay, and Kathy, I think you're our last one, Kathy O'Connor.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a majority vote to move this to action.
This
And-
is Ellen. You missed me.
Who did I
We're
miss?
missing Tricia. And I vote yes.
Oh, where are you, Tricia? How come you're not showing up on this list of mine? Okay, so sorry. Let me make a note of that.
Did
All
we
right,
call Kathy O'Connor?
I did.
Okay.
Kathy, can we hear your vote?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right.
you did.
Okay, excellent. All right, so now we have moved this to action, which means that.
Too.
How come
Is
I'm
that
not-
Jennifer?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
I
And
vote
what's your
yes.
vote? Okay,
I vote yes, and you can just use Ray's screen. All of our names are right there on a list for you. So you don't have to pick apart who's a senator and who's not.
Oh, thank you, Jen.
An idea.
Jennifer.
You're
That's so brilliant and simple. You think it would have occurred to me. All right, so at this point, we would entertain a motion that would actually approve this.
I move to approve the movement of the TLU to compensate the president.
I second.
Okay, it was moved by Robbie, seconded by Robin. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will now do a roll call vote, starting with myself. I can't see, of course, Ray, I'm not showing up. Oh, there I am. All right, we'll start with Cornelia,
Yes.
Jennifer Hamilton,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Jennifer Baxton.
Yes.
I will vote yay. Michelle,
Yes.
Savannah,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Robin,
Yes.
Jennifer Betancourt,
yes.
Robbie Fisher,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Tricia. Tricia, can you hear me? I think you're muted, Tricia. Okay, we'll come back. Anna?
Yes.
Okay, circling back to Tricia. Tricia, do you want to vote on this motion? I don't know what to do. Okay, so I will, Ray, what do I do? I can't hear somebody.
I can't see that her picture is up. I would say just count it as a non-vote.
Okay, all right. So now all in favor, do we have to go through for nays and abstentions? Go through the
No,
whole
no,
list?
the roll call, everybody said their vote, right?
Okay.
Except for Tricia. So
All
I
right.
think you're good.
Okay, so we will go ahead and say that by majority vote, this motion passes. And I will turn the meeting back over to you now, Ray.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, item 9.1, great. Moving on to item 9.2, adoption of our community guidelines. So if you remember last meeting at September 9th, we had this item that was there as part of our consent agenda. But as a matter of fact, a few of you had a couple of questions, so we moved it into discussion this week. So if we can clear up those questions, that this is a discussion item, so we can start there. But similar to our last item, if folks are ready to accept our community guidelines, we can move them to action, and then after they're in action, we can vote on them. So with that, I can open up the discussion about our community guidelines. Jennifer Hamilton, you were the one with questions, so I suspect you have those questions with you for this week.
I have, thank you, Rand. I do just have one. So being that we're the Senate body, I just wanted to know, once we are, or I guess just have it, the discussion, once this has been voted on, what any expectations are for subcommittees of Senate and or other committees on campus with this. I just, for reference point.
Sure. So first of all, college-wide committees aren't under our leadership or our purview or our consideration. We certainly appoint to those committees, but the leadership on those committees are defined by the chairs, and the participants on those committees are codified, you know, either by CPC or the EVP, or perhaps they report to the superintendent president. So I don't think it would be appropriate nor functional in a lot of ways to have Senate guidelines for community expectations to go there. I do know that there was a request from PEC, for example, that is a college-wide committee, to have their own community guidelines. So I shared our guidelines with them. I'm actually co-chair, so it's with us, a little awkward, for PEC to adopt their own, edit them, and adopt their own. The CSEA also requested our community guidelines from us. They also are interested in having some hard conversations and doing some authentic anti-racism work, and they thought that having an example of community guidelines would serve them well, so I very happily shared them out with them. Any other campus group that would like them, also I will share them out. But I think it's important to point out that whether it's a campus-wide committee or a Senate subcommittee, that these are ours. We worked on them as a retreat, and they are going to work for us. And that's what's part of being this community, that we're all buying in and approving these and saying, yes, this is from the framework from which we all want to interact and work together. So it's not going to go to college-wide committees unless they ask. And the same is true for Senate subcommittees. Because they're community guidelines, I think it's important for each individual community to say, what are their norms and what are their practices. And so these are, in my mind, these are just for us, but anybody that would like them as a template for their own, in my mind, is welcome to have them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Was that your only question?
Yeah, I just wanted to expand, just exactly what you said was perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. But anybody that wants them, I think, can use them. Any other discussion points or comments at this time? Or motion to move it to action, if somebody's so.
I motion to move it to action.
I second.
Counselor Jen seconded. So is there discussion on the motion to move this to action?
Sorry, who was the person that made the motion?
Pam Gunther.
Pam Gunther. Okay, I'm seeing no hands raised for a discussion on the motion to move this to action. So at this time, we will do another roll call vote. Okay, let's look at our membership. All right, going down our list. So again, the motion on the table is to move our community guidelines to action. Cornelia.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
Jenny.
Yes.
Patricia.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
Devonna.
Yes.
Pam.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Robin.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Robbie.
Yes.
Ruth.
Yes.
Tara.
Yes.
Russell.
Yes.
Trisha. Is she still unable to unmute herself? Okay. So for right now, we will register Trisha vote as a non-vote. Anna.
Yes.
Great. So this item has now been moved to action.
May I move to adopt it?
You may.
Then I do that. I move to adopt these.
So Robbie makes a motion to adopt our community guidelines.
I'll second it. That's Jenny Baxter.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Jenny. That was Jenny Baxton seconding it. So we will go through. Oh, is there a discussion would anybody like to discuss approving this at this time? If so, raise your hand. Not seeing anyone wanting to discuss this, and as such, we'll move on to our roll call vote. So again, I don't think I've mentioned this, just to clarify, your options are yes, no, or you may abstain. Cornelia.
Yes.
Jen Hamilton. Counselor Jen, you there? We'll come back to her. Ellen?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Patricia?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Devana?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Robin?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Tara?
Yes.
Russell?
Yes.
Trisha? Trisha has not voted. Anna?
Yes.
And who did we miss? We missed Jennifer
Jennifer
Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's
Hit my computer.
No, it's all good. Okay, so with that, we have now adopted our community guidelines. And by the way, I'm really excited about that. I think we did a good job on these. So now that they're ours to live with, they're ours to live with. So those will be placed on our agenda after the Zoom guidelines so that we all remember them and can review them and refer to them as needed. All right, so moving on to item 9.3. This is going to be a big one for us. So discussion of guidelines for fall 2020 faculty rankings. So we have a big job at Senate in a few weeks. Our October meetings, the first, or excuse me, not the first two, our October meetings will be mostly spent listening to faculty proposals for new or replacement positions, and then ranking them as a recommendation to the superintendent president. Our recommendations will go to the superintendent president along with the recommendations from Dean's Council, and from there some faculty hiring hopefully will take place. So we have a number of issues to discuss today of how we want to go about them this year. Hopefully senators ahead of time have reviewed a number of these documents so that you are familiar with the process. You can ask questions about these. I'd like to go over very briefly a couple of the points that we really need to discuss and decide on today. We need to discuss basically the Senate hearing schedule. And with that, I have a document that I will share out today with us to show you. And the schedule will be explained in a minute, but it will also be based on some of our decisions that we make today as a Senate. So one of the decisions that we need to discuss is the dean's ranking. In some years, in many years actually, it was past practice to hear the dean's rankings before we ranked via the WOPAT method. It's described in one of the documents. So the question is, do we want to receive or hear the dean's ranking before we rank our own? There are legitimate reasons to hear them and legitimate reasons not to hear them. So that's one consideration that we need to decide upon today. And then also, if you remember in the spring, there were a number of, quote, failed searches for different departments. In years past, we always, or maybe not always, I don't want to say always, I don't know if that's true, but almost always, we took our failed searches and basically put them at the top of our ranking, and we did not ask those departments to represent and provide a proposal. We do find ourselves in a very exceptional year in many different ways. And so the question is, do we want to not consider those, let me say this differently so that you don't misunderstand me. Do we want to automatically rank those positions at the top and not ask those departments to provide their proposals to us? Or do we want to start with effectively a clean slate, even if they were failed searches from the previous year, and just re-rank all positions this year at Senate. And that's why I said our schedule depends on one of those two. So let me remind you where the failed searches were. We had a failed search in biology. We had a failed search in English, which technically wasn't a failed search. If you remember, at the time of our summer emergency meeting, English was actually in the process of final interviews, and they never either happened or the final hiring was ended because of our budget crisis, as well as medical imaging. There was one more failed search, of course, or not a failed search, but a stalled search, and then an execution of the search, which was for ESL, and ESL has decided not to put in a proposal for this year, and so that's why they're not part of this consideration. So again, there are really good reasons to rank them at the top, and that's why we always did it in years past. And yet this is an exceptional year, and so there's really good reasons not to rank them at the top and re-rank everyone. So with that context, I'll turn it over to you senators for questions, discussion points, and the same. So Michelle, your hand is up. Go ahead.
My thoughts are, because of everything that is going on and how our world has changed, that it's important to re-rank everybody. It may have been, something may have changed that requires, or that one department's need is stronger, or you know, things have changed so much. And I think we're in different times, and everybody needs to be reevaluated fresh. And it may turn out the same. It may turn out that, you know, medical imaging is the one that is the priority. But I think we need to have that information.
Okay, thanks for that, Michelle. Jenny?
I just have a question about the dean rankings. How and when do those get determined, and when do they come into play? Like, do those ever go to the president separately, or do they only happen within the committee themselves? Like,
I'm a little confused. So maybe I need you to ask it again. Essentially, like, not similar to us. We have a very like clear and obvious process that's like published here on the Senate. But within Dean's Council, the deans discuss with, I assume Pamela, she's here, she can probably clarify this even better for me because I've never been a dean, right? And then from their own ranking, from their own ranking process, it gets forwarded on to the president along with ours. So the president receives our rankings and their rankings, and then makes the decision from there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Russell?
Yeah, so to get back to what we were talking about, previous approved replacement positions with failed searches, is there a number we could agree on? I know sometimes we go into the 10s, 12s, 15s, and that, you know, that approval that might be ranked 12th, you know, that priority might not be anywhere near the ones we rank 1 or 2 or 3. Is it possible we could pick a number that if this replacement position we had ranked as either 1 or 2 or 3 would automatically go through because they clearly demonstrated great need? It's obviously over a great period of time, and the process for just getting a replacement position is so arduous to begin with. To make them go through that again, it seems like incredible punishment, while also incentivizing perhaps accepting a less than stellar candidate.
Which is exactly why we've always re-ranked at the top, so that there wasn't an incentive to just hiring somebody. Sorry, Elroy, I can't talk right now. So with that in mind, that is part of the discussion. He just fell on his bike. Come here, bud. So what I'll say to that is, Russell, the reason why they got ranked last year is they were our top rankings last year, right? So they already were at the top. And the other thing I want to share out with all of you is if you remember from our summer meeting, that at that time, during the budget discussion, Dr. Goswami was only going to allow for 2 hires for all of last year and this year. And so when the Senate, our state Senate, changed the budget at the end of July, I think it was, and things got a little bit better, Dr. Goswami said, okay, we can hire 2 that are on hold, and they hired for geography and what was the other one? Business. And then the nursing was also hired because that has external funding, which wasn't affected by our budget. And since then, Dr. Goswami has only confirmed 2 positions for us this year. So we have more failed searches already than we are being told we have positions to hire for. So there will still need to be some kind of ranking by us. So if we take your suggestion, it would just be using last year's rankings for English and biology, and medical imaging. And then all of these positions would then be ranked after that. We could, of course, go back to Dr. Goswami, and I have a meeting with him this Friday, and I will certainly ask for more faculty positions. But I just want to make sure that his message is clear that from June and July, he has told me more than once that we have 2 positions for this year to hire. So I just gave you a really long answer, I know, sorry. Just want to make sure that we're all going forward with the same information. Patricia.
Yes, I want to state up front that I have a conflict of interest in this whole conversation. So what I'm going to be telling you right now is factual, and that is when the Senate last year did this process, we did not have information about who was going to be taking the SERP, and that is information that we have now. I have compared who's on this year's list because the deadline was yesterday afternoon for submitting proposals or requests compared with last year's, and it's a very different list. So I think this would support Michelle's contention that everything has changed. We have the SERP, we have different players, we have a different situation this year. Thank you.
Ruth.
I'm basically going to echo some of that, but some new things, I think. There's no reason why we're not operating efficiently. If you were in industry, you'd be considering everything would be on the table all over again. So that's one thing. If there's ever a time to fine tune our decision-making process, this is the time, right? Because so many things have changed. And if we don't have each of the positions on the table again to re-rank entirely, because of the SERP and because of other things, maybe even enrollment issues, we could potentially be impacting departments, right? So I think, yes, it's asking folks who had a position, at the top of the line, at the front of the line before, to put in some more work. But for the interest of the college as a whole, I think it's a relatively small ask, given the benefits that can come out of this. And then in terms of the dean's rankings, same thing, right? We need this information. I think we need it to update our priors, right? We may learn some things that may lead us to reevaluate our criteria and re-rank some things. So there are certainly important considerations that they can shed light on that need to be on our radar.
Ray, can I make a point of order here?
Yes.
We have this on today as a discussion item, and when steering met last time, I think you were literally having a baby that afternoon, and so we didn't have privy to your calendar, but I've seen your calendar since. Some of these things, if they need to have actual votes, I think the only thing that we could postpone would be the dean's ranking. We could decide that next week on the 30th. The other things that have impact on who's presenting, we need to know that today. So again, just to reiterate, we could postpone one of these items, but number 5 definitely needs to be decided today. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Patricia. I agree. We have next week's meeting, September 30th, where a number of our items can spill over. Robin, but not the scheduling. Robin?
Right. Sorry, mute problems. Can I ask how many positions were put forward? Is that open knowledge at this point? How many proposals were sent?
22.
So I would say with that number of proposals in an environment where we've only been given 2, that there are a lot of things to consider. And if we rank the proposals that were approved last year at the head of the pack, we're making that decision by default. I mean, honestly, why would we have, everybody come and present in some ways? I think it's probably not the most responsible way to make decisions in this horrible crunch time, to not hear everybody and weigh everything out together. So I guess I'm just echoing what Ruth and Patricia have said.
So I feel as though I've heard a number of arguments for re-ranking everyone, and perhaps one argument from Russell taking out our failed searches from the re-ranking from the ranking process and not re-ranking them and just placing them at the top. Are there other people? Are there other senators that have a dissenting view, which is to not rank everyone, pulling out our failed searches and giving them priority? If so, please raise your hand now. Contribute to the conversation.
If we were to do something like that, would it not be, I mean, we would still need to listen to all 22 position or proposals?
Well, I think it's, yes, we would still want to go through the ranking process, in my opinion. One, it's part of our processes, and it's one of the most important things, probably, I don't know if that's hyperbole or not, that the Academic Senate does all year. We would also want it for posterity, because this year is tough, but perhaps next year is not so tough. And so oftentimes, you all know your senator positions are positions for 3 years. Oftentimes senators will look back and hear from departments that have said, I've come here 7 years in a row and this is how badly we need this, we're here again, and things like that. So we would still want to stick to our processes and go through the ranking process, even if it was for naught, because we know we're not hiring that many, right? So you're all staring at me, I'm staring at you, there's silence. So if there's not more questions or discussion, I'm getting the impression of the Senate that we want to rank all positions no matter what.
You should.
Is there, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Is there a formal motion to move this to action so that we can decide on that?
I move to move it to action.
I'll second that.
Great. Ellen, Robbie, discussion on moving this item to action? Nope. Okay, with that, let's make sure we get through this. We have a timed item coming up at 4:10. So going through with our roll call voting, again, the motion on the table is to move the recommendation to re-rank or rank everything, all positions, moving it to action. Cornelia?
No.
Cornelia's a no. Jennifer Hamilton?
Yes. Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Tricia?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Ivana?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Robin?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Ruth?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Russell?
No.
Russell's a no. Tricia?
Abstain. My internet was out for the last 20 minutes, so I missed the discussions. I'll abstain.
Okay, thanks, Tricia. And Anna?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion has been passed, or the motion is passed to move this item to action. And so now we have this discussion item, which is specifically about ranking everything, all of the proposals. I need more sleep, which is ranking all of the proposals that will be put forward to us. So with that, I'd like to share with you let me do a new share, the schedule that I came up with for re-ranking of all positions. So let me explain briefly the schedule, because I think the motion should be made to incorporate the schedule so that we can share it out. Okay, so all of the departments that put in for proposals and the number of positions they requested are given in columns A, B, and C. So the department is listed, the contact person that submitted the proposal on behalf of the department, and then the positions requested. So that's what you're looking for the first 3 columns. It's been past practice to give each single proposal 8 minutes, where additional proposals, like for 2 positions instead of 1, an additional 4 minutes, or for 3 positions instead of 1, an additional 8 minutes. So that's why the time allotted is given in column D, which is given in numbers of minutes. And then to randomize the schedule so that I wasn't biasing anything or anyone or any department or the number of positions and things like that, I used a random number generator to assign a random number to each of the different departments. So these numbers here were created with a random number generator. And then I sorted the departments by that number in ascending. So that's what that column is. So that's how I got the ordering of the schedule. So from there, with 2-minute break in between every proposal, it looked like we were sitting at over 3 hours of presentation time. And as such, I scheduled the presentations over 2 days. And again, all I did was sort the different departments by this random number that I used. And so that's how the dates and times were given. So the first date will be October 14th. You'll see that people who are requesting 1 position got 8 minutes with a 2-minute break in between. 2 positions got 12 minutes, and then the 1 department that was asking for 3 got 16. There is a there's a 10-minute break scheduled in on the 14th and not on the 21st, because the 21st we have less proposals to get through. So that is the schedule and how I came up with it. So with that, this item is in action. So if there are questions or a motion that anybody would like to make, please make sure that you're doing it now. Patricia Stark.
I move that we approve the schedule as presented, with the 22 positions being ranked.
With the 22 positions being ranked. Yep. So all of the positions will be ranked this time around. There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Who was that? Ellen?
Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen. Okay, is there discussion on the item in front of us? Okay, Cornelia.
Yes, one of the reasons I voted no to move this to actions today was that I would like to hear back from your discussion with Dr. Goswami if in fact we are limited to replace only 2 faculty members.
Well, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Right? So if I recall correctly, the SERP included 26 faculty retirements, include the last year and this year. We're having another one because Christopher Bates has submitted retirement, I heard. We have one faculty member who was successful in her bid for becoming a dean. On the other hand, we did, so that is, where are we, 28? So we did replace 3 faculty members this fall. Plus 2 is 5 out of 28. I'm very concerned about this number, about this great reduction of and great loss of the number of full-time faculty. I do not see the same happening in the ranks of, for example, management, where administration was asked a couple of times at CPC and other meetings if we have a hiring freeze or not having a hiring freeze, or who decides which managers are replaced. I do see job announcement for managers going out. So again, I'm very concerned about being offered 5 replacements for 28 positions lost. I would like to hear your response, or Dr. Goswami's response back to you, if we can have more positions before voting on this.
Okay.
That was my initial.
Right, so that was your question. I've had an answer. The answer is, as of Friday, September 11th, when he and I met with each other, he once again confirmed and said we have 2 positions. Which was your question?
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you would have another meeting about this next week.
Well, I have a meeting with him Friday. I've met with him dozens of times since July, and every single time I ask him, and every single time he tells me we have 2 positions. At 4:15 today, we're going to see the budget proposal. So I think that might illuminate why there's only 2 positions. I can ask him again this Friday. I don't mind asking him. I haven't minded asking him every single meeting, but I'm just saying that the answer has not changed because our budget deficit hasn't changed.
Okay, am I allowed a clarification comment? I am very aware of the budget. I am just seeing different standards for replacing faculty compared to replacing management positions.
So I understand that. And I think that well, that may be, okay, sure. I think that's fine. Patricia.
Yes, as the maker of the motion, I want it to be absolutely clear that I did not base my motion on the fact that we support or in any way affirm that we will get only 2 faculty positions. I know that was part of the conversation we had, but this is solely based on the principle that since so many things have changed since last fall, that everyone should be reconsidered. So I just want it very clear, if people are understanding that my motion was in any way a support of that 2-person limit, then I will revoke the motion. I strongly feel that faculty needs to push back against this 2-person limit. So I don't know how you want to deal with that. If that's what Cornelia understood, it concerns me that's the way others are understanding it.
That is not how I understood it.
Okay.
The motion at the table was to approve the schedule and move forward with re-ranking because things are in a different place.
Okay.
I provided the 2 number because, as I just shared, every meeting I've had with Dr. Goswami, he has reaffirmed that number.
Thank you.
So I just want to be very clear that discussions have been had and that number has remained the same for months.
I did not misunderstand your motion, Patricia. I was just hoping that we could wait because I was assuming that there is another meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Ruth.
I don't think we need to wait because there isn't a limit that we're not, committing ourselves to a certain number of positions. And I just want to say again, Patricia, you actually said it right when I was about to speak, that we can absolutely push back on this, right? Or ask and have a discussion with him about the particular needs, right? Especially since we're looking at everything with a fine tooth comb, and you know, there's going to be departments and programs that could be impacted because of this big deficit that we have, and the objective that the superintendent president has to deal with it over the next 2 years, rather than one. I will say that, that's what he's trying to propose to the board, that they not fix the problem, whatever that fix entails, in a year, instead give us more time, which is great. But yeah, so this would not commit us to a number of positions.
So I want to be mindful of the time. The time is 4:15. We had a timed item at 4:05. We have a motion on the table. And I just want to clarify that, in case the message isn't clear, that the Senate has discussed this with Dr. Goswami and pushed back on this. That can continue to happen. 2 is not the number set in stone. I'm just providing facts that it has been steady, just so that we're all clear on that. Michelle?
I hear everything. The only thing that I'm wondering is that, is there anybody that has experience bargaining for faculty positions in the past? Is there, I don't know if you've, not that you're not doing a wonderful job, Ray. I know you're fighting for us. I have no doubts about that. I'm just wondering whether there's other resources that are out there to push why we need more positions. That's my only question.
I don't have.
And you don't have to answer that. It's just,
I don't have an answer to that. I think that's a wider conversation. You know, we do have a foundation constantly seeking outside support. We're constantly going after grants and things like that. I think that that's a much larger conversation. I want to bring us back to the motion that's on the table. The motion that is currently on the table is for re-ranking the 22 positions and adhering to the schedule for our October meetings. Patricia?
Yeah, I've got quite a bit of experience with what Michelle just described, and let me tell you, it's a fight. And I think actually I've been pretty successful. So what I will say now is that when we send when we send Ray into these discussions, we want to have her armed with as much information as possible. And I think once we go through these hearings, we will be, and we hear the degree of need, when we hear the absolutely excellent arguments almost all of our colleagues are going to put forward, if not all of our colleagues, we will be in a much better position to help Ray with the position statement going into these negotiations. So I think this is the logical next step. We're going to hear these proposals. Then I think we should very quickly schedule a discussion on what information we want to provide Ray with when she goes into what are frankly very tough negotiations.
Ruth?
I'd like to call the question.
Thank you.
Okay.
In order to call the question, oh my God, I've got 2/3 here. We have to have a 2/3 vote to end discussion and call the question. So maybe we can just see if there's any other discussion before we have to go through another.
Sure.
Any more discussion? Okay, it doesn't look like it. As such, we can just move on to voting.
Yes.
All right, so let me share out my board docs with membership. Okay, Cornelia.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
Jenny. Jenny Baxton.
Oh, yes.
Patricia.
Yes.
Michelle.
yes.
Devana.
Yes.
Pam.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Robin.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Robbie.
Yes.
Ruth.
Yes.
Kara,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Trisha,
Yes.
Anna.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Okay, I will share out the schedule with the different department chairs and we will go from there. The remaining items that we did not get to on our agenda will be placed on next week's agenda. So with that, we'll need to move on very quickly to our presentation time specific items. And I'm going to call on Jana Garnett. I'm sorry, did somebody say something? No, I don't think so. Okay. And Janet, hi, thanks for joining us today. So sorry about the delay.
It's okay.
You do not have slides to share with us, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm just gonna turn it over to you and you're on speaker view. So go ahead and let us know about this change in the notes for our classes.
Great, thank you for your time. My goal today is to provide information to you, the Senate, for consideration. The department, the DSPS department, wants to gain institutional support and buy-in for a new model for the provision of peer notes for students with disabilities. Keep in mind, when I approached Rayanne to be put on the agenda, I was looking through the lens of face-to-face classes, and I'll revisit that in a moment, so keep that in mind. Brief background, peer notes is a very common accommodation across all the community colleges. It's very embedded in the K-12 system as an accommodation for disability. And it's tied to specific disability limitations. For example, someone with slow processing speed, student with dyslexia, attention deficit disorder, memory deficits, things of that nature. Peer notes are intended to augment or supplement a student's own notes. It's not to replace their note taking. It's an add-on because they are able to take their own notes. A peer note taker is a student enrolled in the same class, and it's voluntary. And keep in mind that there are several different note taking supports. I did submit a toolkit for your review, and essentially I want to differentiate between like a two-tier system that we have. Right now we have the peer notes model, which again is voluntary and it's a peer enrolled in the class, versus what we call an auxiliary aid. An auxiliary aid is a paid note taker, not enrolled in the class, that is taking notes for a student that cannot take notes for themselves, right? So that's the two-tier system. And in that particular instance, a student might be hearing impaired, visually impaired. They may have a physical limitation that prohibits the ability to take notes. And so essentially that person is paid for their time because they're not in the class, and they are going to convert their notes into an electronic version to provide to the student so they can use technology to access those notes. So that's the two-level model that exists currently. When I started here in 2011, we had paid note takers across the board. So whether it was a peer note need or an auxiliary aid, they were the same. And that was costing the DSPS department approximately $25,000 to $30,000 a semester. I recognized that that was not something we could sustain. So in about 2012, I sent out a survey to my directors across the state. And I found out that the shared notes model is the standard practice. And so obviously no financial compensation, but other ways to do that. And right now, what I'm hoping to do today is present a different design for how we handle the peer notes piece. So the free, the non-paid situation. And it's a small change, but it's an important one. So currently, right now, a student comes in, they get approved. If they get approved for that accommodation because there are limitations, they're taught how to send their letter of accommodation to their instructor. Their instructor acknowledges the letter of accommodation, and then the responsibility is placed on that student to find their own peer note taker. And then DSPS offers to provide the non-carbon paper. As you can imagine, there are several barriers built into that design. Many of our students are very uncomfortable pursuing a note taker. Again, we're going back to that face-to-face instructional model. It's awkward, there's stigma, it sort of points at self-disclosure. And so many students just don't use it and they just let it fall by the wayside. And we have no doubt that that impacts their success in the class. And oftentimes they don't even come back to their DSPS counselor to say, I need help. I can't find one. I don't know how to have the conversation. So the proposed change is pretty darn simple. The student gets approved for the accommodation. Now we have a legal obligation. The student sends their letter of accommodation to their instructor and their instructor acknowledges it. At that point in time, DSPS would like to see the instructor solicit a volunteer in the class to be the note taker for the class. The note taker is not for the student with the disability. It becomes a normal standard that instructors ask to have one note taker for the class. We can talk about that in a moment. And then really it's flexible whether the instructor wants to give those notes to the DSPS student or if they want DSPS to handle all of that, we're happy either way. The change is who has that responsibility of finding the note taker. At the end of this, we would offer that student a certificate of community service that we would just make our routine way of saying thank you so much for doing this. So really the shift is from student to instructor. Quickly, the benefits of this type of change is we're able to fulfill our legal obligation. Secondly, we maintain confidentiality of the student. There's no tripping over our words and then having a student be really uncomfortable. It's universal design. It serves all students. If you have a student that's hospitalized and is not part of DSPS, they might come to you for those notes. No cost to the college and ensures equal access and supports student success. So that is a lot of information, but a pretty simple change. And in a perfect world, I'd love to see this model work in any type of instructional format. I think right now we have fewer students needing that additional set of notes because there's so much instruction embedded in the remote learning environment. So that's where I leave this, and I'm hoping you can all consider it, and I'm happy to answer questions if there's time now, or we can do that another time.
Thank you so much for that. Is there a couple quick questions at this time?
I was just going to add the only other piece that I hear a voice on my shoulder right now with the model that exists is that we're leaving students sort of flapping in the wind, right, from a legal perspective. And so that's our greatest concern. We've never felt good about this model, but we have to have a model for it. It just isn't the model we want right now. We're hoping for something a little cleaner.
Just was wondering how I didn't even know that it was the student's responsibility. I always thought it was my responsibility because it seemed like they'd be self-identifying if they asked a student. So I have to say initially I was confused because I couldn't figure out what was new here, but I guess I was doing, many of us probably were already doing that part except for asking for a note taker for the whole class. That's the one thing I didn't really do.
Got it. So I appreciate that. And I believe there's several instructors that already do that and we appreciate it. We're just looking to make it more of a standard practice, like putting the disability statement in the syllabus, just something we do.
Now, are you suggesting we ask that every class, whether we have a DSPS student, or are you saying if we have one that needs a note taker, then we make a class announcement?
The second from a legal point of view, but the first would be ideal because I can guarantee you you're going to encounter a student that would really benefit from those notes, whether they're DSPS or not. So it might be a nice idea just to do it as a part of your routine. It normalizes it.
Tara.
Hi. Yeah, I am one of those faculty who was already kind of playing matchmaker for students for note taking.
Uh-huh.
My one question is if I ask for a note taker for the whole course, I'm likely to get loads of students who want access to those notes. And so I'm wondering, like, where do those notes live? How do I sort of manage it? And then what happens when a volunteer doesn't come to class or stops coming to class? You can see there might be some potential gaps that we need to kind of anticipate for.
I hear you, and you're absolutely right. So I think you'd have to have very specific criteria. You know, the notes are for you as the instructor to disseminate as appropriate, and you could also have that cutoff of saying it is for students that are approved for this accommodation without calling out students. So we could work through those details. We could, you know, come up with a script that everyone uses, and there are going to be days where that person is out, and so we have to figure that out, whether you have 2 volunteers or, you know, but those are things I'm happy to work out with faculty if we decide that we can move forward with this model. But very good points.
Kathy?
So I have had issues with this in the past where I really don't have anybody in the class that wants to be a note taker. The other issue is, what if they're not very good note takers? I don't really want to have to spend time reviewing through somebody's notes to make sure they're really accurately taking notes. This is, I mean, I get the required accommodation, but this can be really problematic in our classes. And I have asked in the past, and nobody has sort of volunteered. So we sort of get stuck.
So in that particular instance, I would be happy to work with you and that problem and come up with something that would be maybe a little more inspiring, but we can't afford to do something across the board. So we, you know, and again, with the notes, we're not looking for the A student. It would be nice if it was, but these are supposed to be peer notes, so average notes. And so we don't want to make that your responsibility. The student needs to tell their DSPS counselor if the notes do not suffice, and then we can work with the instructor. I don't want to put that burden on your plate.
Michelle?
This may have been addressed already, but it would be great if we had a template that all instructors sent out. So we're requesting the same thing. It's consistent. Students become familiar with it no matter what class they're in, and they know that this is something that's going to be coming. That would be very, very helpful.
I couldn't agree with you more, Michelle. I think the way you do, it's consistency, it's predictable, it's become standard practice, and we would be happy to provide that. Thank you.
Jenny?
So just to clarify, in this new model, if this kind of gets normalized and adopted, we would not say that this is for DSPS purposes in our class as a whole, or I feel like in some way you might actually get more buy-in and better notes, even if you said that it was for those purposes, but you're saying don't disclose that at all.
I'm not opposed to that. I'm completely fine with that if that's what we decide our standard script is. It's very safe and we're not calling out students. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying it's, at this point, it's not an essential piece of it. Thank you.
So Michelle, one last comment?
Sorry. So if other students ask for these notes, we have to tell them that they cannot have them if they're not a DSPS student.
So, you know, going back to Jenny's point, which is a good one, it might be the cleanest way to just make it very specific that it's for students that have approved accommodations and leave it at that. And then that way you're not going to have an onslaught of requests. You can choose to make an exception if somebody's, like I said, hospitalized, but that would be up to your own discretion. But I think that's a good way to keep it very clear what the criteria is.
But if you wanted to post them on Canvas for everyone,
Yep, you could do that.
you could do that,
Absolutely.
right? So if it's just part of your Canvas shell that somebody creates notes and then you post it there, I mean, you're not saying not to do that. You're just saying that you don't have to do that, right?
Exactly. But that changes that extra responsibility of probably looking at those notes and deciding if it's appropriate or not.
Got it. Thanks so much, Jana, for sharing this with us so that we could have some input and a conversation about this. It's always appreciated.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Great, thanks. So with that, we'll move on to our last item for today, which is a budget presentation by James Zavas. Christina, I actually don't have host privileges right now. Could you please make him a co-host so he can share out his presentation? And while that is happening, Patricia.
Yes, we have an item on the agenda about addressing AP 4105 distance ed and how we need to change that in order to deal with some of the new challenges coming up. So how do you want to deal with that, Ray? We just move it forward to our next meeting?
I was going to have it be put on September 30th's meeting.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And I'm trying to keep September 30th's meeting light, which is ironic because everything's moving there, but I was trying to just have it those items to finish up and deal with before we go into faculty rankings.
So if I can, I just want to point out right before James gets started that in the liaison reports, our academic policies committee has actually started identifying some of these issues and has started raising some really relevant questions. So before we have this conversation on the 30th, I encourage you guys to go into the liaison reports and see the conversation that AP is having so we can all start our engines on the same starting line. Thank you. Sorry for that terrible metaphor. As soon as it was out.
It's all right. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Hey, James, thanks for being here today. Thanks for looping us in on that.
No problem.
Why don't you
So,
go ahead and get started
all right.
because you crept into your time.
Okay. So am I correct? I've got about 20 minutes.
We can always make a motion to extend the meeting, but right now there's 20 minutes left in the official meeting. So take
Okay,
the time
I'll
you
see what I
need.
can do.
Yep, and then if we get to the end and if there's questions, somebody can make a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
Okay. So this presentation is very similar, as in almost identical to the presentation we gave to the board about 2 weeks ago at this point. So a lot of this is kind of already out there, but I did want to specifically present to this group to give everybody A, the information, and B, an opportunity to ask any questions that you all might have. So if you want to see the full presentation, I think it ended up going about an hour and a half with all the board's comments and questions. That's at about 2 hours and 40 minutes into the board's YouTube video from that meeting. So if you want to jump right to the good stuff and listen to the budget, it's, like I said, 2 hours and 40 minutes in. I went and found the timestamp. So let's just jump right into this. So state budget deferrals. So with the state budget, if you remember back to the retreat, we talked a little bit about deferrals, which is kind of that we'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today idea. But basically the state is balancing their budget by deferring payments to community colleges into the next fiscal year, which means that we're going to earn all the revenue, but not actually receive the cash. And that is far better than the original proposal that came from the governor in May, which was actually cuts. So deferrals are considered better than cuts. You just have to be able to manage the cash flow with that. So this just kind of gives you an idea what the scope of the deferrals. We're looking at about $1.5 billion statewide. If they manage to pass some sort of a stimulus at the federal level that contains enough money, then $791 million of that would trigger off and reduce the amount of deferrals to us. So What that really means is we're not going to receive any cash from the state for apportionment from February through June. Our share of the deferrals is about $17.1 million. Now, just to kind of give you an idea, we had over $50 million in the bank just between our unrestricted general fund, our construction fund, and our equipment funds as of the end of last fiscal year. And then there's an additional $27 million in other restricted funds. This does not include any money from student financial aid. That question's come up a couple of times. We actually get that money after we have sent the financial aid out. We send it out and then draw down from the government. So we never actually have cash that we haven't already spent on that. So ultimately what that means is we do have more than sufficient cash to cover these deferrals for this year. So we're lucky. We're one of the districts that's actually in a very strong cash position. So the deferrals are problematic and potentially problematic in the long run, but for this year and probably for the next year, we do definitely have enough cash. Other thing I wanted to highlight, there are a number of COVID-19 relief grants. The one that I think everybody's heard about, the CARES Act, is the Higher Ed Emergency Relief Fund portion of it, is about almost $2.9 million for us. So that's allowed for faculty training and course development, providing IT equipment to students and faculty for distance ed, any sort of like cleaning costs for instructional spaces that's like above and beyond what we would normally have to do. And we can also spend some of that money on direct grants to students impacted by COVID-19. And then there's two other grants that came in the final version of the state budget. There's a $617,000 federal pass-through grant. It's also part of the CARES Act. It's the coronavirus relief fund portion of the CARES Act. So these funds we have to spend by December 2020. And then also another $757,000 block grant that we have until June 2022 to spend. For both of these, the primary allowable uses are like re-engagement strategies for students who had incompletes or fails in spring 2020, funding online course development, professional development for faculty and student services professionals, investments to close the digital divide, and support to address any other barriers, cleaning supplies, PPE. There's a few other things in there, but that's kind of the main categories. So right now, we've used a lot of this money buying Chromebooks, hotspots, the paying for professional development, paying for, in terms of distance ed, professional development, paying for updating courses, things along those lines. We still have money left in this area, but we're working on exactly how to allocate it. But ultimately, like I said, this one has to be spent by December 2020. We won't have any problem spending it in that timeline. All right, so really quick, the changes from the tentative to the adopted budget. This is kind of just highlighting what's changed since we looked at the budget in June. So our FTES have essentially declined a little bit at this point. They went up in summer, they're down a little bit in fall. So based on that, we're budgeting based on our 2019-20 P1 FTES, which basically is the minimum amount of revenue we'll be able to receive from the state. They have some emergency conditions in place where we're able to use our last year's numbers in place of any numbers this year. So in the event that our resident FTES do end up declining, we'll be able to use last year's numbers going forward. So that's what we've got in the budget. Just some minor adjustments to the lottery. The big change is, as we got into summer and into fall, we started recognizing that our international and out-of-state enrollments were way down. So that's where we've updated our budget to include a 60% decline in international tuition and a 45% decline in out-of-state tuition, which is about a $4.5 million decline in our revenue for international and $2.1 million decline in out-of-state. So that's a pretty significant decline. And that's about $3.5 million worse than where we were when we looked at the tentative budget. On the other side, on the expenditure side, we are offering a smaller schedule due to lower enrollments and efficiency initiatives for fall and spring. So we're estimating a savings during that time period of about $3.3 million, which is a $2.9 million more savings than we had included in the tentative budget. And then also, due to the fact that we have limited on-campus operations, we're anticipating we'll be able to save about $360,000 in our utility budgets. We did originally have about $100,000 in the budget, but now that we're anticipating that we're going to be out a little bit longer, and we've had a chance to look at just how much you save when the campus is running on a limited basis, this is a little bit of an updated estimate. We also updated our transfer assumptions. The first two are really just kind of minor adjustments in terms of the Children's Center and our self-insurance fund paying for liability insurance. We're also going to need to transfer $900,000 to food service to cover their, the salaries of those employees. And then the parking fund also, and both of these are due to the fact that we have very limited to no on-campus operations for the full year. So those are areas where we typically receive significant revenues, and we won't be receiving those revenues this year. So we'll have to backfill those salaries. I do want to point out that those employees are working. They're being reassigned. So it's not that they're just sitting at home and getting paid. They are working full time. So that's just one thing to highlight. And then also facility rentals. We've heard from Kaplan that they will be coming in and starting their lease in December. That's going to allow us to transfer about $75,000 actually back into the general fund and income from those leases. So, okay, real quick look at the numbers. So when you take all of that, roll it all up, this is what we're looking at. So this is also, if you look at this slide, you can see our unaudited actual, that middle column. I just want to point out, we did end last year. We're still working on this number. It will move between now and when we finalize it. We did end last year about a $2.9 million deficit, which is better than what we had in our original budget last year, our adopted budget, which is that first column. You can see we originally were anticipating about a $3.3 million deficit, and it ended up being about 2.9. Some of that is that our enrollments ended up better than we anticipated, and our revenues were better. And then the other parts of it are on the expense side. We ended up saving money in areas, you know, with the coronavirus. Like I said, with utilities, we saved some money. And then, you know, there's the unfortunate things that we typically would plan for spending money on that didn't happen. You know, athletics, travel, field trips, things along those lines. So that's just like a real quick look at last year. And then if you look at the adopted budget, again, I'm going to kind of come down to that area. Let's see here. At the bottom with our net change in fund balance. So that's showing we're going to have a $4.9 million deficit next year. That's very large. A large part of that is due to the coronavirus and the fact that, you know, our international and out-of-state tuition has declined so significantly. So that's where we're at right now. I'm not anticipating that moving much. We're pretty settled on our unrestricted general fund budget. There might be a couple minor adjustments as we really dig in and analyze it, but at this point, this is pretty settled. So this slide kind of shows where that leads us with our ending fund balances. So you can see a couple years worth of history there. And then the far right column is the where we're anticipating ending with fund balances at the end of the next fiscal year. I do want to point out a couple numbers here. So our board policy on fund balances is that we need to have 5% from the state, which is that top number, plus either 15% of our expenditures or the total of the general of deferrals, whichever is greater. So in this case, because our deferrals are so high with that $17 million, it ends up being that general apportionment deferral, which is going to actually put us about $1.9 million under the board policy in terms of the reserves. If you look in the middle and down towards the bottom here, you'll see that typically we would have a 20% reserve in a year where we don't have any deferrals. In this year, we're going to look like we're going to need about the board designated portion is going to be a just under 23%, but we're actually going to end with just over 20%. So if it wasn't for those deferrals, we would end up with about kind of where our normal fund balances would be falling kind of within that normal policy. But because the deferrals are just so high, that's why we're actually going to need to ask the board to go underneath that policy. And again, it's related to the coronavirus. This was absolutely an unforeseen situation where and what we have reserves for. So, all right, so that was our unrestricted general fund. This is a quick look at our capital projects funds, just kind of walking from where we are at the end of last year in terms of the reserves in those, and then adding in our revenues, taking out planned expenses, and then just kind of there's some money that gets transferred around or money that comes in from the general fund. And then this basically takes all of that and combines it and shows it to you as a graph. So here, that gold line, that's basically where that board minimum policy is. The blue bar is what that one is referring to. So you can see we're kind of a little underneath that. All right, so this is one thing, budget uncertainties. So essentially, as we go into the budget, this year's got more uncertainties than normal. The big one, non-resident tuition. Trying to project non-resident tuition at this point is very difficult. We don't really know what's going to happen. So what we have now is our best estimate. We tried to be fairly conservative and put in a significant decline because that is really what we're anticipating. That being said, there is a chance that we could receive either more or less revenue from that area. We really just can't get that down too precisely. The other thing, from the state budget, we do rely primarily on revenue from the state, and in the event where the state's revenue collections are lower than what they anticipated in their budget, there's a chance that we could get what is called a deficit factor. If you remember, that's basically when the state budget doesn't have enough money to fund what they said they were going to fund, and they provide us with less revenue. Those are areas where they don't typically come back to us in the future. So that's always a chance. Right now, for last fiscal year, they're anticipating less than a 1% deficit factor for the year, and that can always move. Okay, and then the other thing that's worth highlighting, like I said, the state is using significant deferrals to balance the 2021 budget. We do have sufficient cash to cover that, but the question is, how long do those deferrals go on for? They are planning on paying them back from July through November of next year. Then the next question is, do they then defer any of that into the next year? So that's kind of a risky area for us. And then the other thing is, this budget does assume savings from limited on-campus operations. If we're able to open fully in the spring or do anything different than that, we would have to go back and adjust this budget because, like I said, this is assuming all of those sorts of adjustments. All right, so basically where we're at in the budget process, we're pretty much finished with the unrestricted general fund. We're continuing to refine our restricted funds, working with fund managers to make sure that the budgets are what they need. We're also working on how to allocate those COVID relief grants in order to maximize their benefits and make sure that we're able to get people what they need with those. We're also taking another look at all of our revenue generating funds, just based on now they've had some time to operate a little bit and see where they're at, particularly in the campus store and with the Children's Center. Those areas are ones where we want to say, okay, now that you've had a chance to open up, what are we anticipating there? And then obviously at this point, we're taking the budget around and sharing it with everybody. So, CPC kind of ran out of time on 9/15. We'll bring it back again on 10/6. We're here today, went and talked to CCG on 9/14. Friday, I'll be at the Associated Student Government. And then the big one that I want to make sure everyone's aware of, and please share with people, we are going to be having campus budget forums on 10/1 and 10/2. So those will be presentations, probably a little bit different than this, that are going to have a little bit more information both about last year and what the budget numbers are looking like for next year. Just to make sure that everybody on campus has a chance to take a look at the budget and see anything along those lines. So does anybody have any questions real quick on that, on those budgets?
I have two questions for you, James. The revenue. So our RAP tip, or not the revenue, the reserves, sorry, two R words.
Mm-hmm.
Our reserves are kept in kind of a funny way, especially around banked TLUs. I remember Lindsay mentioning this to the board, and she really didn't get anywhere with the board with that. So if you were to take out, or not take out, how do I want to say this? If you had like a normal reserve, like quote, other community colleges, would we still be under by 2 million?
So that actually changed end of last spring.
Oh.
We did actually update the board policy and take that bank TLU language out.
Okay.
So that's where you'll see this designated piece here on the bottom, going from 21.6 down to 20. That's taking out that bank TLU piece.
Okay.
So what's really causing us to go underneath here is these deferrals. Because the policy does say that it'll be either 15% or deferrals, whichever is greater. That's what's causing that number to kind of go up and above that 20% is because those deferrals are so significant. One thing that they've said at the Chancellor's office, the amount they're doing in deferrals in this fiscal year is more than they did in the entirety of the Great Recession.
Ugh.
So they're doing more in 1 year than they did in the entirety of the Great Recession. So when you keep that in mind, these really are very, very significant deferrals.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. My other question for you is that we're going to have to ask the board to go under our reserves. It's been my impression that that has been a very contentious point for some time. But it seems as though we pretty much have to. So do you have a feeling of how that conversation is going to go, or what we're going to do, or?
I think they're pretty aware at this point.
Okay. So you think it will?
The number hasn't changed. It's just that minimum reserve moved up. So I think they're fairly aware of where we're at this point, and the fact that, like I said, we basically lost $6 million in revenue in the international area, international and out of state. So that's a pretty significant shift in 1 year, and I would say that kind of qualifies as the type of emergency where you would use the reserves and kind of why you have them.
Okay. That's a relief, because previously, when we were having these discussions, even within the last couple of months, they immediately went to talking about furloughs and layoffs and things like that. So that was a pretty scary conversation. Robbie?
I have a question, but we're out of time. And so I also, before I ask my question and maybe make room for others, I want to move to extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
I'm sorry, was that a motion?
Yes, I move to extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
Thank you, Robbie. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
That was Robin. So there's a motion on the table to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. So we would be ending at 5:15. This would allow us to have more time with James and a continuing presentation. So if there's not any discussion, we can move quickly to vote on the motion. Okay, so with that, let me bring up our list. I know Cornelia's first on the list. So
Ray,
yes.
excuse me, point of order. I just want to let everyone know we only need a 2/3 vote to extend the meeting, which is a total of 12 yes votes.
Okay, thanks for that, Patricia. Cornelia?
Yes.
Jen Hamilton?
Yes. Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Jenny Baxton?
Yes.
Patricia?
No.
No. Michelle?
Yes.
Devana?
Yes.
Pam Gunther?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Robin?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
That makes
Yes.
10. Got it? Yep, thanks. Robbie?
Yes.
It's 11. Ruth?
Yes.
Yes. Kara?
Yes.
Russell?
No.
No, we have 12. Trisha?
Yes.
And Anna?
Yes.
Thank you for that. Okay, so our meeting time has been extended by 15 minutes. We will now end at 5:15. Robbie, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I have a question for James. I don't have a good head for numbers like this, and I have to explain to my division what's going on. Can you sort of sum up deferrals again? Like so what exactly are they not paying and when are they going to pay it, I guess is my question.
So I'm trying to think. I think the easiest way to think of deferrals is they ask us to do all the same work we would normally do, offer all the same classes, and they say you're going to get the same revenue for doing all of that, but we can't pay you until next year.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you look at the deferral schedule, they're going to stop sending us money in February, and we won't see any money. Actually, yes, because they're front loading all of the categorical programs in order to make sure that districts have as much cash on hand before they stop paying them. So it's really our apportionment money that's being deferred, and technically some of the C money as well, but that's just in order to, they didn't have enough cash within the general fund apportionment, so they're deferring some of the C money as well. It does not reduce the amount of money available to anybody to operate, it just reduces the cash. So we won't receive the cash. And then next fiscal year, starting in July, they'll start paying us back for the cash they didn't send us. So it's kind of a loan. It's almost like we loan the state money by them not sending it to us.
What do you mean when you say cash? I mean, I know what cash is, but like you said, we'll have the money to do what we need to do, but they're not paying us anything. How do you reconcile that?
So essentially, we have cash reserves, and so that's why I'm saying we have more than enough cash.
Oh,
we have over 50. We literally have over $50 million in the bank.
Okay.
So the fact that they're not going to send us $17 million that they were supposed to, is the reason that I'm saying we have more than sufficient cash.
Okay, thanks. Now I get it.
And so we're going to spend down our money, and then eventually they'll pay us for what they didn't send us.
Okay.
They're basically giving us a big giant IOU.
Then actually that brings up one more question. The dip under the board's desired level for reserves, is that gonna, are the reserves gonna be below that line even after we do get the deferrals paid?
So that would mean that we would recalculate what the minimum is. Say there's 0. If there's, I'm going to go back to that slide real quick. So if this deferral number was like in any of these other years and is 0, then what we would do is look at 15% of our expenditures, and that would recalculate this minimum level. And then we would have to look at what we have at that point and compare it to that minimum. So if we've spent down, depending on how much we spend down and how much our deficit is in the next fiscal year, that would kind of answer that question. So we would, it really depends on how much money we have, what our planned deficit would be in the next fiscal year, and whether or not there's deferrals again. So even if we go down to that 15%, we would still have a 20% minimum requirement, which is in our case typically right around $20 million. And so that would put us, you know, if our reserves are under that, then we would still be under the board policy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Robin.
So I don't know if I'm going to know how to ask this question cohesively or not, but so you've said that we have cash and that's good, but we also have this $5 million deficit, and that's what the board keeps wanting us to address, not to be in deficit spending, regardless of the cash that we have on hand to pay bills, right? So what are the methods that are being proposed, if you can share, with how we get into a balanced budget? My understanding from the board meetings is that they expect that to happen not this year, but next year, correct?
Yes. So this year we're going into, like I said, the budget is pretty set at this point with about a $4.9 million deficit. What they're talking about is how to address that over the next couple of years. So you can see a little bit here kind of our history of our reserves, and we've been consistently above that minimum, but they used to be significantly higher, and they've been kind of getting chipped away at every year. You can see like this next year is where we're looking at a pretty big drop, and that's, you know, because of the, you know, the coronavirus.
Right, and that's something, sorry, that's something that's been mentioned at the board meeting several times, is that we've had this pattern of spending down the deficit over the last several years. So are there things that are being proposed?
Nothing specific is being proposed at this point that I'm aware of. They are having a chunk of their study session, I believe it's tomorrow night, dedicated to talking about it. But, you know, Dr. Goswami has mentioned this a couple times. At this point, there's really, you know, in order to reduce, there's really only one area that we can take it out of, and that's in the personnel area. There's no room to cut anywhere else. So, you know, the other side of that is if we can increase revenues somehow. You know, so those are kind of the two sides of it. We either need to increase our revenues or decrease our expenditures. And at this point, you know, we've cut for the last few years everything else. So there's not many other places to go. And I think, you know, Dr. Goswami has been fairly consistent with mentioning that.
Yeah, so, but I think that bears repeating, if that's okay, James, if you'll entertain me. So we have been operating with a significant deficit for a number of years. And we have been very lean, and we have been attempting to address the deficit in various ways. And so now we are at a point where we must either be very creative and find revenue, and or one way to address the deficit, and one of the only ways because of where we're at financially, is through personnel. Did I say it accurately and similarly to the way you said it, James?
Yeah, that's fairly accurate.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody understood why and how I repeated that. Robin?
Oh, sorry, I have left my hand up again when I already asked my question, but I thanks for repeating that, Ray, because I was going to ask the same question again. So is there any planning going on currently that you're aware of for how that will be accomplished? Given what Ray just said, that it means personnel likely, in addition to possibly raising revenues.
Nothing that I know of.
Thanks.
Cornelia?
James, would you mind please scrolling back up to the slide where you talk about the $3.3 million in for the more efficient schedule, the reduced schedule, please? Thank you. Since we were talking about reducing personnel, I just wanted to mention, since we are the Academic Senate and representing faculty, I really like to emphasize the fact that this first bullet point, this huge savings of over $3 million, that is sections, that is TLUs. These are part-time faculty assignments, mainly. This is also reduced overloads for full-time faculty. That means that is number one, personnel. Number two, this is faculty assignments, which I just want to make sure that we are aware that we have a lot of part-time faculty who might have only had one assignment or two assignments and now are walking away with none. Thanks.
Ruth?
I'm glad you mentioned that, Ray, about, that clarifying point that you made. I don't think it's fair for us to put James in this position about how we're going to take care of this. So since he's not making that decision, and it's a very uncomfortable position to be in, I think, to have to respond to that. But I will say that Dr. Goswami has at CPC explicitly, publicly told the body that we need to start thinking about the nature and the scope and the size of this college. So this is why we as senators need to be paying attention to these numbers and to these conversations, watching board meetings, paying attention to what's happening at CPC as well. I will say that Dr. Goswami seems to be open to it being a collective, at least there being collective input. So that's fabulous, it's great. But I just want to point out to senators how incredibly important it is to have our eyes open at this moment, to be informed, and to ask our faculty in our departments and our divisions to be as well.
Yes, thank you for that, Ruth. And I do want to say that now that we've finally called a spade, and I agree, James is here and he's the numbers guy, so we're putting him on the spot, and yeah, he's just the numbers guy, right? You're more than that, James, of course. I just mean, like, you're not going to make it.
No, I'm pretty much just a numbers nerd.
But what I'd like to say is, this is what has made the conversations with Dr. Goswami about faculty hiring so hard. We're looking at a multi-million-dollar deficit, and we're talking about reduction in force, which is a polite way of saying looking at personnel to make up for this deficit, as we all just named several different times. And so how do you demand more hiring at the same time you're looking at a reduction in force to take care of the deficit? So I just want to be mindful of this reality that's in front of us because of the current situation with the budget. Counselor Jen?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I have a question for James, and I don't know if you went through this and I just missed it when taking some notes. About the summer sessions, was that ever discussed of how much revenue we're bringing in during summer sessions, 1 and 2, versus maybe when we only offered 1? And I I'm just curious if that was ever looked at, and that, maybe that's just, this isn't the right place to ask, I don't know, but I'm just curious if any of those discussions have come up.
I can respond to that.
Oh,
That was
thank
actually
you.
presented at CPC, and in one of my liaison reports, I don't remember which one, it was put in there, but I can get that to you, Jen.
Thank you. I don't remember that, and I apologize for that.
The time is now 5:14. We voted to extend our meeting an additional 15 minutes, which means we are coming up and closing very soon. So at this time, if there's any remaining questions for James or discussion points, please make them. And if not, we can open up for a motion to adjourn our meeting. Ruth, your hand is still up. Perhaps you left it up.
Lowering it now.
Lowering it now. Great. We're all going to awkwardly stare at each other until somebody makes a motion to adjourn, just for the record. Michelle?
If Michelle doesn't, I'll make it.
I motion to adjourn.
There we go.
I second.
Cornelius?
I missed my opportunity.
If everyone can unmute themselves and say yay.
Yay.
Yes.
Yay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
There.
You're getting some rest
I
and
am.
having some time to enjoy your little newbie.
Yes, she's amazing.
You're a rock star.
Congratulations.
I don't feel like a rock star. I feel like my brain is mush, but thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.